And with that presentation on the objectives and the outcomes, I'm sure it leaves us with no doubt in our hearts that this is going to be a very engaging and very robust meeting, something to look forward to. At this juncture, I would like to invite the Director, Disaster Management from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, and she is going to be giving us a presentation on strengthening Nigeria's capacity for effective disaster management. She's in person of Dr. Dorothy Nwodo. Can we put our hands together as she comes up? Thank you.
The Honorable Minister for Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Hajia Sadia Umar Farouk, the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, Engineer Mustafa Maija, welcome. The UN Humanitarian and Resident Coordinator, here being represented, you're welcome. The Assistant Director Management Coordinator, International Federation of Red Cross, you're welcome. And the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Umar Tijani, please, you're welcome. Other distinguished partners and donors here present, you're all respectfully welcomed. I'm going to give a short, and my directors and the directors of the Federal Ministry that are here, and staff of the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, you are all welcome. Oh, and the representative of the Minister of Health, you're welcome, madam. I'm going to go ahead and give a short presentation on why we are here. We are here to strengthen the Nigerian capacity for effective disaster management. Next slide, please. If you look at the map of Nigeria, it's showing the various sections of the country and saying where we have the major disasters we have had in Nigeria in the past years. You have in the northeast statistics of about 35,000 people killed so far, and about 1.8 million people internally displaced. You can see on the right side, on the top right side. And you have about 7.1 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. And then 230 people fled to Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. Also in the northeast still, you have 80% of IDP are mostly women and children. And I will have the UN women here. We would like to collaborate most effectively on this aspect. And then we have also in every 4 persons, you have one of the IDPs, they are under 5, the Federal Ministry of Health. We would like you to come into this seriously, to engage with us. And other agencies here that are dealing with mostly with the under 5s, the vulnerables, the women and children. Then in the northwest of Nigeria, you have hundreds and thousands of IDP that are displaced as a result of banditry. And that's the arrow showing up there. And then down south, you have thousands of IDP due to boundary conflicts. That's the one you've seen down in southern Nigeria. In total, you have, in the last year, 2019, we had 32 out of the 36 states of Nigeria affected by flood. Fortunately for us, we are going to have somebody, a consultant from the central bank, going to talk to us on flooding in Nigeria, because 32 out of 36 is a major crisis last year. And as a result of this, we had economic loss due to flood of almost $17 million US. And it led us to extreme poverty, affecting almost 100 million people in Nigeria. And Nigeria is now one of the worst record of disaster management in the sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, please. If you look at this slide, it's supposed to address the humanitarian crisis, extreme poverty resulting from disasters and emergency. Due to this great concern, the president, Mr. President, created this new ministry, the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, on August 21st, 2019. And you can see it on the top, showing the three arrows of the three departments. You have the disaster management in the center, and then you have on the right the social development and the Department of Humanitarian Affairs. And we are supposed to be working all together to ensure that we achieve the goals of this ministry. Next slide, please. The disaster management provides governance and oversight of all disaster management activities in Nigeria. We have a five-fold responsibility over Nigerian disaster management activities. And these five-folds, you can see, is like a house there. We are supposed to coordinate, ensure that integration of all disaster management mechanisms for resource efficiency. And then you have two. The ministry is supposed to supervise, provide policy direction and strategies for disaster management, and guide the implementation of these policies. Then the third aspect is the monitoring aspect of it. We are to routinely track Nigerian progress towards the implementation of its disaster management policies and strategies. We're also supposed to regulate, enforce the implementation of this disaster management activity in line with the extant laws and policy frameworks. And in the fifth one, we are supposed to provide support to reinforce disaster management mechanisms and institutions. Now, to fulfill our responsibility, the disaster management department will deploy three-step processes. We're going to diagnose. During this workshop, we're going to review extant laws, policies, and implementation framework. We will map out existing stakeholders, mechanisms, and their roles in disaster management. We are going to review successes and challenges to identify enablers and root causes. We will analyze the country physical space for the effective management, disaster management. Then, what is our design in doing this? We will develop recommendations and action plans for challenges already identified during the 2 days we're going to be here. We develop and update laws, policies, and implementation framework as may be required. We review and agree stakeholder roles accordingly. And we develop resource mobilization strategies to implement these policies and plans. And how do we want to deliver? We support capacity strengthening for the relevant stakeholders, mechanisms, and institutions. We will monitor and regulate policy and strategy implementation in line with the frameworks. We will ensure resource efficiency across stakeholders, mechanisms, and activities. Next slide, please. The department will also conduct review of laws, policies, and implementation framework to understand the country's guidelines for disaster management. The review will cut across the global, the regional, and the national policy framework. Some of the global policy framework is stated here. We have a lot of them. For example, the international disaster response laws and others. Then under regional, you have the African regional strategy, for disaster risk reduction and others. And on the national, we have a lot. We just mentioned just a few. National Disaster Management Framework, National Disaster Response Plan, and others. Next slide, please. The stakeholders across governmental and non-governmental structures will be mapped to understand existing mechanisms for disaster management. The disaster management structure begins with this ministry, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. Then it goes to our implementing agency. That is the National Emergency Management Agency, the NEMA, and the directors here, DGs here. Then we go down to the state emergency management, SEMAs, and the local government emergency management, the LEMAs. And they will be interacting and then collaborating with other government stakeholders, like the federal ministry. Our ministry will be collaborating with the Ministry of Education in terms of school disaster, water resources in terms of flooding, finance in terms of money for us to do the disaster management processes. And the NEMA will be also collaborating with the agencies that we're implementing. We'll be collaborating with the agencies such as the fire service, the port authority, the road safety, the police, the military. And the state ones will be collaborating with the state ministry, departments, and agencies within the state. And the local government will also do the same. We'll also be dealing with the community structures. When you get down, you will be doing with the non-governmental organizations across the whole country, the neighborhood associations, the religious organizations, the civil society, and international organization and development partners and donors in the Nigerian space. The next slide, please. The department will also review and analyze Nigerian physical space for disaster management to galvanize and optimize the sources of funding, because disaster management requires a huge source of finance. And this will be conducted across the following elements. One is conducive macroeconomic conditions, the budgetary allocations to disaster management, the increase in sector-specific resources and efficiency in expenditure, and the disaster management specific grants and foreign aids. Finally, what is our next steps? Our next step will include, we'll collate all feedbacks obtained from this workshop or meeting. We will refine and disseminate the ministry's plan to sustainably strengthen the capacity of the country to effectively manage disasters. And then we will commence implementation of these plans in close partnership with all of you here, our relevant stakeholders. And finally, I want to thank all who are here, our Honorable Minister, for giving us the opportunity to have all the stakeholders here present. Thank you for listening, and welcome again.
Thank you very much, Director